Hello, this is Craig Mertens. I'm Director of Product Education for Inktavo, the parent company of GraphicsFlow, Inksoft, and Printavo. Welcome to our webcast today. I believe this is the fifth webcast in our Supacolor series, and we are going to be talking about our preparation with direct-to-film and hybrid digital transfers with Brett Sands, live from New Zealand, the Director of Digital Operations from Supacolor. And Brett, I am super excited to have you on the webcast today because I'm a fellow print geek and I love talking about graphics. And, it's not my daily life as it used to as being part of a family business that was a screen printing operation. But in terms of education, it's definitely where my passion lies. And so the first thing I wanted to kind of chat about today, I wanted to ask you a question. What is the difference? We talk about DTF and hybrid digital, and it's something that's talked about quite a bit, but can you kind of explain the difference between traditional direct-to-film and what you're doing at Supacolor?
Yeah, thanks for the intro, Craig. And it's a pleasure to be here today. I guess the best way, or I found the best way to describe it is it's like having the difference between having an exotic sports car and buying like a second-hand Honda or something like that. And one's not necessarily better than the other, and one is going to suit your purpose better than the other. But I think with Supacolor transfers, the difference is that you get more vibrant colors for starters. It's more durable because we're screen printing that white ink on the back, and therefore you get a more vibrant white as well. And in a sense of the transfer itself, you've got all those things, but you've also got like world-class customer service and a whole bunch of people that want to help you kind of get your job across the line.
That's been my experience as a customer, not only as a colleague. What you see on the screen right now, that's an HP Indigo.
Yeah.
And you're going to be writing a check for $500,000 for one of those bad boys. And I remember having Ron and Mike on, and they were talking about their first experience trying to make a transfer with one of these things, and they bought a used machine, if I get the story right, and broke all the warranty stuff and just started experimenting on a $500,000 machine to see if they could get it to work.
Yeah, we basically pulled the insides out of it to make them work.
Yeah, I pulled the insides out of it to make it work. So this is a little bit different than a solvent inkjet printer. This is an HP Indigo, and if you want to nerd out, I'll drop a link to this little video here, and you can actually see kind of the rudiments of how one of these very interesting machines work. It's pretty neat, and it's a drum-fed machine, so it's actually making plates on the fly, and then those plates are actually rolling around cylinders and picking up ink and depositing them onto paper. And there's the groovy music, so you can kind of see it come through here, and there's a pass of yellow, and there's a pass of looks to be cyan, and I don't know, that maybe it was magenta and black, but it's actually using 4 colors. And when you guys are creating a transfer, can you use spot colors as well? I think you're using some spot colors like silver and some other additional colors besides CMYK.
Yeah, we use the metallic silver to put behind our metallics, and because we're running more than 4 colors, just CMYK, that allows us to have a wider gamut of color and hit some of those spot colors. We don't have specific spot colors loaded in, as in like ink canisters, but we just use the additional colors, the violet and the orange, to widen our gamut and hit those real nice reds and oranges and the royal blues and that kind of thing.
So as opposed to using 4 colors, when you use 6 colors, you can just get a wider range of colors and brighter colors. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
And that allows you to match and hit Pantone colors. And that's a big deal from my perspective, having to kind of instruct clients on how to prepare artwork. And I have customers that will email me and with very specific technical questions. And Pantone color matching for digital heat transfers is very problematic for, I think, just about every manufacturer of traditional direct-to-film transfers. How are you guys able to hit those Pantone colors and actually like to get Pantone colors? And everyone else is like, yuck, don't send me Pantones.
I think to be honest, we still struggle with some Pantone colors. I think we can hit about 90%, which there's a lot of Pantone colors. So there is a range that we can't hit. But the reason we can hit those other ones is simply because we're running a violet and an orange ink additional to CMYK. So through all the red colors and all the blue colors and purples, we can get much closer to spot colors there.
Yeah, I think everyone has that same problem. There's certain Pantone colors that are just really hard to hit. I know some of the kind of more neon type colors can be a little bit problematic for folks. One of the other things we probably should mention is that once that PET film comes through this printer, what happens? Where do we end up from here?
So what we do is we create a couple of positives as well, which will just for everyone in screen printing is just those the black positives you use to expose a screen with. And we make one for our white base, which is the white ink, and then the glue ink. And then that goes out to the factory, and those two get exposed in the screen. And the screen printing ink gets put on the back of that color sheet.
So is the glue actually being screen printed then too?
It is, yeah.
Wow, that's huge. And what if there's white in the actual graphic? Do you have to do a separate screen print step for the white in the graphic, or are we just letting the underbase show through?
We just let the underbase show through.
Wow. So it really truly is a hybrid process. And so one of these production lines, I'm guessing, I don't know, $1 million?
Yeah, that'd be in the right area. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, so you're probably not going to have one sitting in your garage. Most people probably wouldn't have one sitting in their garage.
No. I think we first started printing on a manual table with a squeegee in the screen. And that was an old throw-out kind of milking table from someone's garage. And we just hooked up a vacuum cleaner to it. A guy that I still work with, Jason Nelson, and him and I kind of developed how it would work, me on the artwork side and him on the screen printing side, to make that original kind of hybrid transfer.
I want to talk about your company philosophy behind artwork. I always feel like some of the vendors, and I'm a consumer as well, we order transfers too. I always feel like sometimes we're getting punished because of our lack of knowledge and understanding of how, necessarily graphics work and what they need on their production requirements. And also, it's hard to play the game when you don't really know the rules. And it occurs to me like sometimes the order processing systems are set up for the convenience of the supplier, not the consumer. So the question for you is, what is your philosophy at Supacolor about graphics, how you guys handle graphics?
Yeah, thanks for that question. That's a good one too, because it's something close to my heart. When we started Supacolor, I'd also been in the printing industry for quite a while, and I know what you mean about punishing the customer because they don't know what their artwork is, if it qualifies or not, or whether it's good, or whether you can print from it. And it kind of seemed that a lot of the places that I worked for initially did that kind of thing. So coming into Supacolor, it was just me sitting in a room doing artwork and running the Indigo printer as well. And I kind of didn't have time to push back, and I wanted to, and that kind of, I guess, was the birth of Supacolor brand promise, which was to make it super fast and super easy. And that kind of came from necessity, but also because I didn't want to punish the customers. I wanted to go away from that kind of way of thinking. And so that's where the philosophy around our artwork has come from, is that we'll do whatever we can to make your artwork print ready. We want you to be happy so that your customers are happy as well. And I found a good, or someone gave me a good saying about it the other day, and it was that investment in knowledge pays the best interest. That's kind of our mindset, and when I employ people, that's the mindset I want them to take on as an artworker for Supacolor, is that you should have the best solution to the customer, but also educate them around it too, so that they can come back next time and provide the perfect file. And it really empowers them and makes them happy and excited that they can do that the next time for you.
So what is the magic, man? Like, how do you, you get all this messed up artwork, how do you guys go about correcting? I know you have what's called Superflow, right? Superflow is like your pre-press team. What's the magic there? Is it just a lot of human equity and brain power you guys are putting on these things?
you're on the button with that one. It's a big room of print geeks and people that are creative. We have musicians, we have gamers, we have ex-graphic designers, we have ex-print people, and it is just a big room of knowledge. And they all love to share it, and they all love to find new ways of finding a solution for the customer. And it's quite hilarious because sometimes it's almost like a library where all you can hear is mouse clicking and it's dead silent. And then someone will come up with something, or they'll be stuck on something again. The whole room will come together, and everyone get up from the desk and have a look and go, why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? And then when they nail something down, they automate it or make an action for it, and then they're away again. So it's really a sight to behold, but when they're really going for it there, I think we deal with around 800 files a day.
Wow.
A lot of them are really good and some of them are really bad.
So what do you do with a low resolution logo? Like somebody pulls a 1 inch by 1 inch JPEG off the internet at 72 DPI. Do you guys end up redrawing that into vector?
Yeah, if we can, we'll definitely redraw it. There are times where we just can't do something like it is like postage stamp size, right? 72 DPI or 45, and we have to go back to the customer and say, look, we've tried everything. There's just nothing we can do. And to see if we can if we can get a better file from them, and they usually can find something. We hit the web and find something that's slightly higher resolution that we can get a redraw on.
Yeah, a little power tip here for you folks that are ordering DTF transfers or hybrid digital transfers. One of the things you can do, first of all, we talked about, you can't play the game if you don't know the rules. So oftentimes with bitmap graphics, photographic graphics or something, maybe just right click on a logo on the internet and download it. A lot of times it's not necessarily the resolution that's the issue. Typically web graphics in a browser are going to be 72 DPI if they're like a JPEG file. Sometimes it's the absolute size and the image quality. And so you can have a really big, physically large graphic, but it can still be very fuzzy with poor quality. And you can have a pretty small graphic, like 2 inches by 2 inches, but it's 600 DPI at high quality. It'll print great. So it's kind of that combination of the actual quality of the file, the physical size of the file, and DPI, trying to find that little magic sweet spot to get good output resolution. This file right here, this is 100% bitmap, was just, I want to say it's 10.5 inches wide, and it was like 10.5 by 13, and then if it's at 300 DPI, it printed crisp, perfect. So one of the things that I kind of want to chat about here is if you could, I'd like you to walk through the kind of the art specs and kind of decipher a little bit, kind of what all this fun stuff means. And so if you go to the Supacolor website and you go to resources, you can download the art specs, and these specs will work across really any supplier. I'm pretty confident that if you created a transfer piece of artwork for any DTF transfer supplier, that you'd have a pretty good result using these specs. They're just really good specs. But for Supacolor, these are the unique specs that are required for Supacolor. So I'm going to scroll to page 2, and we can kind of talk first about the CMYK versus RGB.
So RGB is a screen color profile, and it's how the eye views colors on screen that are produced by light. And CMYK is a printing color model. So that represents how color looks when it's printed and you physically look at it. So of course, light is going to be brighter and more vibrant than ink or toner or whatever it may be. So we need to have the files provided ideally in a CMYK format, and then when it prints, it's true to what it looks like for you. RGB, usually when converted back to CMYK, looks a little duller on the screen.
So if you're working with like a pro graphics package, like say Affinity Designer is a bad example because they don't process CMYK. Everything they do is through RGB. But Adobe Illustrator is a good example, and Curl is a good example of pro graphics programs that can handle either one. And so if you start off and you're designing and you recolor your design with a swatch book or color palette in Curl speak, that's already CMYK, then you don't really have to deal with it. So when I send this file in, I just went and recolored it with CMYK colors, so I didn't have to really put any brain power on it, and it turned out great. The next thing that we're kind of chatting about is avoid thin, free-floating lines. And when I first saw this, I was like, oh, I never really got this until I saw the visual. What you're saying is it's okay to have those thin whites, but it has to be on something. It has to be sitting on top of something. Is that kind of what we're displaying here, or am I missing that?
No, what you're saying is correct. We have, or we will soon update this, the middle one. But what it is saying is that we can only, because we're screen printing a white behind the color, or if it's just white by itself, we're just printing white and we're using a mesh screen, there is a minimum amount of ink that will be able to be pushed through that screen and onto the carrier sheet. And so it needs to be a minimum of 0.2 millimeters for us to actually physically be able to print that ink behind it.
Yeah, screen printing ink kind of naturally spreads, and you have what's called dot gain and dot loss too, which you have to worry about. So thin lines, they'll aren't on top of anything, probably aren't going to look great. You're going to get pretty muddy. Is that correct?
Yeah. And you can put them on something like that black circle there, or you can just thicken it up slightly. Yeah. So you're meeting that minimum line weight. And that's pretty fine. Like we can do really nice fine detail and hold it perfectly. But in anything under 0.2 millimeters, then it kind of, as you're saying, dries in, or you get the dot loss.
If you go to GraphicsFlow.com, and we have a playlist for direct-to-film and hybrid transfers, I recorded a video kind of showing how to correct for these things. And so what I did with the white R is I just put a white in Illustrator speak, it would be called a stroke. In Corel speak, it would be called an outline. And I just put a very thin stroke on the R and widened it up a little bit to correct the issue. It's actually a relatively easy fix, but that's keeping in mind that we have a pro graphics program. When you're working with, like, you know, like personally, I like Canva, like program like Canva. I like it if I'm doing like a backdrop for an Instagram post or something like that, or, you know, like a greeting card or a flyer. I think it's great. But for me, doing personal, you know, a lot of my personal graphics and some pretty complex apparel decoration graphics, and those are the kind of limiting factors in Canva that I just can't seem to get around for doing apparel graphics. So bear in mind, you know, with a professional graphics program, people use Affinity Designer. It's a very good, inexpensive program. Adobe Illustrator, that's the not for the meek pro graphics program. CorelDRAW is still very popular. A freeware program that I'm a big fan of is Inkscape, free, and it does a lot of the same things Illustrator and Corel does. Having a pro level graphics program is pretty handy. So the customer that sent in that football graphic, they didn't have any other graphics program, and so that's why I ended up fixing. And so I had actually recommended that she download Inkscape, and we have a good video on our website on how to do these basic edits in the freeware program, which is kind of neat. Let's talk about opacity here for a second, and let's see if I should be able to zoom in on here. Yeah. So I don't know if you guys can see the graphic here. This one has kind of a fuzzy glow effect around the perimeter, and this graphic over here has a more defined, looks like a border of kind of like light gray. So what's the scoop on opacity?
Yeah, so because we want to put that screen printed white behind the color, we can't print a fuzzy edge of solid whiting. And so we need any transparencies or fuzzy glow edges to be at full opacity with a defined clean edge. And yeah, that's about it.
And that's what I had to fix on that NASCAR design that I did, was glow effects. Is there's no defined edge, so you can't get that white underneath there. One of the things I noticed when we do these transfers, a lot of times we'll put a Supacolor logo, and we do it as a giveaway, and we put a QR code on the transfer sheet and the Supacolor logo, and the customer trims that off before they do the transfer generally. But I did a really small Supacolor logo on there, and you guys have gradients and blends in your logo, and it's tiny, and they were perfect. I could never in a million years imagine doing that in screen printing, and even like a process like sublimation. Sublimation could have definitely hit that level of detail, but nowhere near the vibrancy and color pop because we have that white under there. And so I was just kind of blown away by the whole thing. Specifics to vector-based graphics. So let's talk about this for a second. Vector graphics, when you're creating a graphic from scratch in Adobe Illustrator, CorelDRAW, you are creating a vector graphic. It's using lines and points and nodes. It's a big old math equation. And one of the cool things about vector graphics is if you make them bigger, they don't lose quality. They maintain their original quality. When you're doing a raster-based graphic, otherwise known as a bitmap, which is what most of your web logos are going to be, that's composed of pixels. So if you have kind of a rough looking fuzzy edges on your graphic and you make it bigger, all you're going to end up with is a more amplified version of the rough fuzzy edges. And so in a perfect world, right, you probably would prefer to have vector graphics anytime you get logo type stuff, but let's face it, we don't. And anytime you have photorealistic graphics or photos, they're always going to be bitmaps. So it's actually, as a student of the game, anybody that's in the apparel decoration business, having that basic information would be really good. So again, the GraphicsFlow YouTube channel, we explain all that kind of fun stuff. So things that are specific to vector-based graphics, and a vector-based graphic would also be an SVG graphic. So if you're downloading and purchasing SVGs from, say, Etsy, that's going to be a vector-based graphic. And you can edit one of those vector-based graphics in Illustrator, CorelDRAW, Inkscape, Affinity. I think you can even upload those to Canva now. Not positive, I think you can. So convert text to shapes. So editable text objects in your file may not come out correctly. Converting all text to a shape will guarantee your typography comes out exactly the way you want it. Can you explain text to shapes or text to curves for me?
Yeah, text to shapes. If we take your file and drag it into, we use Illustrator, and we drag it into Illustrator, and the fonts haven't been outlined or converted to shapes, then it will, and we don't have that font, it'll try and change it to something else. And it usually gives us a warning that it's going to change so we can see it. But there have been times where it's been missed and we've printed something for someone and the font is completely the wrong font. And so converting text to shapes or outlines avoids this happening. And it makes sure that your file is going to print exactly how you intended.
Yeah, it occurs to me it's never an upgrade when we get a font substitution. It's usually something pretty ugly. I've experienced that, like key or log cabin font, something really bad. If you've ever seen those, you know why that's funny. One of the things that also that's kind of a tricky part is if you're in like Illustrator or CorelDRAW and you publish out a file or save a file as a PDF, Illustrator or Corel will try to embed the font into the graphic, and that's not an exact science. I think that's one of the contributing factors to surprise, wrong font, or things move on positions like if you have text that's assigned to a path, shifting and things. It is just generally an absolute, just part of the step process of sending any kind of vector artwork in to convert it to curves in Corel speak or outlines in Affinity Designer / Illustrator speak. It's just a really nice safety net. In terms of embedded linked images, this is a little trickier one to explain. So I'm all ears.
So we've had this a couple of times recently where you go to open a file and it might be a Illustrator file and it's a mix of raster-based images and vectors. And when you're working in Illustrator, you can drag in an image into your design and you can view it in Illustrator. But when you output it for print, you need to embed it into the file. Otherwise, it's just a link to the image file on your computer. And so when we open it, it says the link is missing. We don't know what it's supposed to look like and it doesn't print correctly. We do have ways around, and there are ways around getting the image to appear, and same with the fonts and that kind of thing as well. But again, it's just a safety net for you, knowing that your printer, your file is going to, and your transfer is going to come out how you want it.
Yeah, with embedded images, like a good example of that is when we would do catalogs, and with thumbnail catalogs, you actually had a software that used a database to go grab the images out of a folder. It didn't actually put the images into, we were using InDesign. It didn't actually put the images into InDesign. It created the previews from grabbing the links out of the folder with all the images. So when we send it off to the printer, what we'd have to do is we have to go through a process, and it works the same way in Illustrator, of embedding, where it literally takes the image out of the folder, makes a copy of it, and builds it into the graphic itself. Otherwise, our printer would reject the file, or they'd get a low resolution preview that looked terrible. So that's a pretty important one, and I would expect to not see that happen unless you're working with like a graphic design team or an ad agency where they're doing some of this more complex stuff. I don't think that's something you can necessarily stumble on as kind of a amateur hack away graphics person. So unlikely to occur. So remove custom spot colors. And I notice we have that lovely European spelling of the word colors. And in everywhere but America, Supacolor spelled with Colours, which I was informed is the correct way.
Yes, it is.
There's somebody explained to me there's a reason it's spelled that way, and it had to do with saving money when you were doing personal ads in the U.S. newspapers. So if you cut that one letter out of there, you could actually save a little bit of money, one less character when you were placing an ad in the paper. That's actually a TikTok I saw on that very topic. Interesting. So so remove custom spot colors. What's that all about?
So this is another one that's come up recently, where we opened the file that has been supplied by the customer, and they've made colors in it that are their own mix of whatever it may be, but then they've converted it to a spot color and created a new palette for it and named it something odd, which could be, sorry, not odd, but something custom that they understand, which might be high school red, or my son's shirt red, or something like that, or an odd name. And so when that, again, most of the time we catch these, but if they get through to the print stage, the printer sometimes looks at that spot file, spot color file, and says, I don't really know what this is, and I can't find it on my list of spot colors. So it just takes a guess and converts it to what it thinks it should be. And some of the time that can be wildly out. And so your transfer may turn up and it doesn't look correct.
Yeah, I notice when that happens, a lot of times it's a screen printer. So in screen printing, if you assign a color to spot, when you print out your color separations, it'll print that color that's assigned to spot as a solid black color separation, which is what you do when you make your film positives for your underbase, I'm assuming. And so what they'll do is they'll create a color palette that matches their ink manufacturer. Like they'll create a Wilflex palette, and they'll name the color Wilflex, 073, which matches the ink in the Wilflex bucket, and they'll set it to spot. And so like what you're saying, it sounds like it just confuses the printers. The reason they do that is it's an internal production thing. It just kind of saves them a little bit of time, and they can see a visual representation of what that Wilflex ink is going to look like. Fairly, not perfect, but like in the ballpark. But that's for any kind of transfer process, I would say that's a huge no-no. And I would definitely stick to the standardized color swatches in like Adobe, and the standardized CMYK color swatches in like a Corel. And I was surprised to find out I downloaded a copy of Affinity Express, and they don't support CMYK colors in their app. I was really surprised by that. So that's kind of interesting. So expand pattern fills. What's that all about?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, and has caused us some headaches in the past. Not so much anymore, but I think in Photoshop and Illustrator, you can build something with a pattern based on from their pattern library, or a pattern that you've created, and then import it into whatever software it may be. And if you then take a shape and clip that pattern inside it, it creates the fill that you want to achieve. And the problem that happens with those, if you don't expand them before sending your print file or saving your print file, is that when we grab it and move it around to do what we do in processing it, pattern can change. And we've experienced that where somebody had some little, for the World Cup, had some little guys with soccer balls, and they had a certain part of the pattern that they wanted to print. When we did print it, it was a different part that was like up there in the file or something like that. And so, yeah, it came out completely incorrect.
Yeah, I'll show an example of that so you can kind of see what that looks like. Yeah. So in other words, let's say you have a circle and it's got a dot pattern or a pattern of hearts, and it looks perfect. It's locked in exactly the way you want it. And then all of a sudden somebody in the art department gets the file, opens it, repositions it, maybe sizes it a tiny little bit, and that pattern shifts because it's not locked to the graphic. And so that's what expanding pattern fills is hit pattern fill and locking it to the graphic so it can't move around. And anybody that, again, that's kind of those power user things. So if you have a pattern to fill in there, you're probably a kind of a power user of your graphics program, and you're possibly working with an outside ad agency. In the Corel world, that we would call that a power clip, and typically power clips are locked, so we don't have to worry about that too much. But they have a whole nother set of problems you have to deal with. So transparent backgrounds. We're moving on to raster specifics, and this is just a persistent bane of existence. Is why when I go to print this JPEG file, why is there this white background on there? And that's not an issue, right? If you're doing it on a dark or light substrate, like white, specifically white. But it's definitely a problem if you're trying to take that same logo and print it onto navy or black. So what's the scoop on transparent backgrounds?
Yeah, that's a very regular one, this one. And it basically means that we can remove the background most of the time, but sometimes we're unsure what parts to remove because there may be white that you want to retain in your design. So it's best to have a transparent background, which can't be achieved with JPEG. So we'd suggest like a PNG file with a transparent background and removing the parts that you don't want to print, or specifying us in the job comments which parts you would like us to remove, and we can do that for you.
So that's a really good point. JPEG files do not support transparency. So you're always going to have a boundary around a JPEG file, typically rectangular or square, and that is going to be filled in with white. And so that has to be removed. And most graphics programs have a masking feature that allow you to kind of knock that white out. But if you're starting out with the vector graphic and you're converting it back down to a raster-based graphic, PNG is always going to be a better choice because PNG has the ability to say transparent background. It's just a checkbox in your graphics program. And also, if you get a JPEG file and you think saving it to a PNG is going to knock the background out, I'm here to tell you it won't. You'll still have but you'll just have a PNG file with a white background. But if you get a PNG file and you think you're going to be cool and save it to a JPEG because you heard JPEG's the coolest format known to man, you're going to get a white background. So kind of in the hierarchy of formats, you probably feel the same way. If I'm dealing with vector artwork, I want a PDF file, period. If I'm dealing with a raster-based artwork, I still want a PDF file, but if I can't get that, I want to take a PNG file. Because PDF files can support both raster and vector data. And what we love about PDF files is we can open them in just about any program. Most programs can create them. And also there's print drivers that are built into your Windows and Mac operating system that can take a document, and when you save it, make that PDF file. In fact, you can do that I do that all the time in Google Docs. So if I'm in Google Docs and I'm doing like a slide deck or, a spreadsheet or whatever, I'll just print it to a PDF file using the print function, which is really pretty handy in my opinion. File formats, let's definitely talk about file formats. We talked about kind of PNG being the way to go for bitmaps. Photoshop, that is the creme de la creme of bitmap-based files. So that'd be great if you got a Photoshop file. You'd probably be thrilled with that. JPEG, not so great. PDF, yay. If you are working in Adobe Illustrator, AI is the way to go. Just keep it in your AI format, text to curves or outlines. And EPS is a little, if you have a simple little logo that's black, black on white or something like that, I think EPS is generally going to be fine. But if you got a really complex logo and you just heard from your local sign maker who's using 30-year-old sign making software that EPS was the way to go, I'm here to tell you it's not the way to go. PDF first would be my preference. So I want to talk a little bit about resolution here, and I've got a graphic, and I actually just pulled up I don't have Photoshop on my system, so what I did is I pulled up one of your graphics that was a Photoshop file in CorelDRAW, and which is I think a really pretty cool graphic. And so the first thing I do anytime I'm working with the graphic is I'm going to go in Illustrator, go to outline view, and Corel, I'd go to wireframe view. And I just want to see what's going on with the graphic. And I can see it's a bitmap because it's got all these little, you can zoom in, you can kind of see the pixels. It's kind of made out of a halftone pattern. And I can also see in Photoshop, it was layers. So when Corel imported it imported layer 1 and layer 2. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to merge this And also I clicked on it and I wanted to see the resolution, and I saw it's 300 DPI, perfect. It is RGB color, not the end of the world. But I also noticed physically it's pretty good size. It was in metric when I opened it, but I changed it to the English units of measurement, and it's 10.3 by 12.76. So this thing's going to print like an absolute champ. So this would be an example of, thank you for sending me great artwork. I got to deal with the RGB issue, but there's really nothing else to worry about here, correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, this one was a nice one to work with.
So let's destroy this. How about that? So I'm going to take the whole thing. I'm going to merge both layers. I'm going to convert it into a 72 DPI bitmap, just like it's a web graphic. And we will convert it to CMYK. And I'm going to make this 72 DPI. And let's see here. Let's go ahead, and I'm going to leave anti-aliasing. What that does is anti-aliasing just kind of blends in the edges, so you don't get that stark staggered effect with bitmaps. And then transparent background, I am going to kind of keep it as a transparent background, and we're gonna see kind of what ends up happening. So we definitely got a color shift, and we definitely saw kind of a drop off in resolution. And as we go in here, that is bad. So that is really not a great situation. So the issue here is really an issue of resolution. So the physical size of the graphic would have been good if it got submitted like this, but the resolution of the graphic was bad. Not necessarily indicative of 72 DPI, but indicative of just the overall quality of the image. Now we'll undo that, and I'll show you something else that's kind of fun. So let's do the same thing, but let's reduce the size of the file. So I'll reduce the size of the file. We'll convert this to, I'm going to reduce this down 50%. So we're going to reduce this down 50%. And then I'm going to convert this bitmap we're going to convert it to 300 DPI. We just reduced it down. And we're still getting a little bit of shift because of the color thing, but I suspect the quality is going to be just fine. And it is. It's fine. It's probably almost exactly the same quality. Now, what's interesting with bitmaps that's kind of fun is if you take this file now and we go back to the original size, so we go back and we double it back to the original size, watch what happens to the DPI. So the DPI went up to 150, so our half the DPI, so it went from 300, and when we doubled it, the DPI went to 150. And if we go the opposite, here we have a file that would print great. If we make this smaller, I think we're in good shape. I think we could go down here in 50%. It'll probably print awesome, probably as good a quality, if not better. But it's going the other direction when we spread it out and make it bigger that causes all the drama. And so now let's make this 400%. And we're probably going to start to see those fuzzy edges being more obvious now. And so the kind of the perfect storm when you're dealing with bitmap files is, I'd say, if you ask me, I'd say, hey man, if you give me something 10 inches in one dimension, 10 inches by 12 or 10 by 10 and 300 DPI, I'm a pretty happy customer. But if I start getting those small images at low resolution, we're definitely going to have problems. And I think, that's where like your Supacolor team is so handy, because their experience, they can look at those files and know, what's going to work. So do you guys use any kind of like interpolation software to kind of improve some of these low resolution bitmaps? Is that one of the little tricks in the toolbox that you use?
Yeah, we use some software to try and double the size of it. And then we use the same method you're doing there. We double the size and then we shrink it back to the print size. And then we'll try and get a redraw on it if we can, or we'll try and put a mask on it. And to kind of just mask out and cut out the anti-aliasing or the very edge on it.
So basically the mask is to create a defined straight edge so you don't have that pixelated edge.
Yeah, that's what we try and do with most bitmaps is to put it within a clipping mask.
Interesting enough, and this is the curl thing. If instead of like converting to a bitmap, if I resample this image, instead of converting it to a bitmap, it has a functionality that it won't do it on this one because I think it's still 2 layers. Yeah. So what it would do is if I just did that layer, it actually has that interpolation tech built in. right here where it'll try to actually improve the quality as it gets bigger. So that's kind of a neat little thing that Curl built into their system. I imagine Adobe has the same thing or something similar. So resolution, we had a good chat about that. So kind of do's and don'ts. Do vector when possible when you're dealing with logos. If you're dealing with raster-based graphics, higher quality images, physically bigger images, higher resolution, 300 DPI is kind of the minimum for, I think you can sometimes you get away with like 200, 250, and it's not too bad from my experience, depending on the size of the graphic, if it's smaller. But, higher resolution, good quality, large physical size, and then vector graphics. The biggies are converting text to curves, staying away from custom spot color. And those are kind of like your ground rules. So with that being said, let's have some fun and let's just kind of take a look at some of the sample files that you sent over. And I asked you to send, I love the way you actually labeled the folders good and bad. So let's look at bad first.
No, I just jump in quickly here before we get started on this, Craig, and just let all of those people out there that are maybe thinking, oh man, this is too much. You can always just send us a file and we'll let you know as well.
Yeah, you guys are operating. Yeah, that's awesome. So cool graphic. I love this. It's very stylized. Somebody gave it some love. Probably designed it in like Procreate or Photoshop. And so the issue we have going on here is these edges, right? Is that what's going on, this glow effect?
Yeah, up where the lightning is around the shoulders, well, around the whole body. That's you're getting that kind of opacity and the glow edge, the fuzzy edge.
So I suppose you could throw a mask around that to a certain degree and then create a defined, so mask, think of a mask as just like an outline that goes around the whole thing and that would define those edges. It's going to look probably considerably different. So this is a good example that when you're working with outside graphic designers, that if you give them like the spec sheets before you have them do the art, you give them that spec sheet, they would probably been able to do something real similar visually, but avoid kind of that production work windfall or issue. On light substrates, like say you're doing sublimation, that's fine. That would be, but it's the dark substrate where we got to get that white underbase. And in the case of the Supacolor process, it's always got white on it. So it doesn't matter if it's on a white background or not. It's not like sublimation where, sublimation can print that whole thing because they're not putting an underbase. But in the DTF process and Supacolor process, we're always using an underbase. And so that's why those fuzzy edges are going to be problematic. Okay, so let's take a look at this one. Oh, low res, my favorite. Hey, if you wanted an example of a really awful low res file, I don't think you can find anything much worse than that. Because that's all that's going to print.
It's got some bits of background in there as well. It's this one, although it's a low res file and wasn't ideal, we did just redraw it and make it work.
Okay, so here's the grand irony of that statement. You ready? This was created by somebody, probably an Illustrator or Corel or a vector graphics program. So somewhere on the planet, there's a perfect vector version of this file sitting out there in probably Illustrator format, maybe Photoshop. And so if one of the kind of a good tip is if you ask the customer, say, hey, listen, do you recall who did the work for you? Because if me and your artist probably speak the same language. So really what we're looking for is a vector file, like an Adobe Illustrator or PDF file. If you can pass that along and have them send in the original file, then we're going to get a much higher quality print. Or, one of the little tricks that I do, especially I did help the client do this, was funny. She was, she had a hair salon and she wanted to do a fun little t-shirt graphic with her own logo, but she didn't have a vector copy of her logo. But you know what she had? She had a price list on her website. And so I downloaded her price list and surprise, surprise, there was a perfect vector PDF file that was produced by her graphic designer in the price list. So there you go. So I extracted the vector, saved it, sent her back the PDF, said, hey, keep this around. This will probably be handy in the future. Okay, this one, let's see here. RGB and transparency. So no way we're hitting those colors and those RGB colors. Probably get something pretty bright though, right?
Yeah, it wasn't too bad when it converted. It was just that the green, you can see the green glow around the outside was the main thing, and a couple of the pinks in there. it was made for this one. It was mainly just the edges of it, and the fact that when you put it color behind it, it changed the color of the design, so it had transparencies in it. So
Yeah,
I think we just ended up going with white behind it, so it made it look brighter.
yeah. If you were trying to screen print something like this, which could be screen printed, you're not going to get anywhere near the clarity and anywhere near the brightness. This is a great example. Even if you're using water-based inks, this is a great example of the just general superiority of direct to film and specifically hybrid transfers like the Supacolor process. So this is the kind of artwork I think that really shines with that digital transfer process, in my opinion. So okay, let's go to the good. Let's go to the good folder. And so we showed the puppet design already. And then this is a car design, which is, I think, pretty standard vector artwork. Just standard vector artwork. That's probably clip art, or maybe somebody drew it. I can guarantee it was done in CorelDRAW. The reason I know it was done in CorelDRAW is because of the BAMP font, which has been part of CorelDRAw.
This one's actually got a bitmap clipped. The car is actually a bitmap, I think.
Oh, is it really?
But they put it in the clipping path, which was perfect.
Oh,
yeah.
Let's see what's going on here. Yeah, sure is. So that's a great example of a combination of vector and bitmap. And oh, this is awesome because you can see that clipping path here.
Yeah,
there's that clipping path. Yep. So that's what kind of gives us those nice sharp edges on there. So very cool. Let's see, and let's take a look at the squid here. Another really cool graphic. So this reminds me like of the, I remember talking to a customer and she was like, yeah, my cousin did our family reunion design and she sent me the artwork and I was like, this isn't going to work at all. It was like done with like colored pencil. So it wasn't really even very solid color. And it wasn't that the graphic was terrible, but it just you could never screen print it in a million. It never would happen screen printing. And then she's like, I have this vinyl cutter. I'm like, let me stop you right there. We're definitely not going there with the vinyl cutter. And so this is before I knew about you guys. I actually sent it to one of the transfer companies and they ended up drawing it to vector. And it actually worked out really well for her because she was able to do a gang sheet where she did like the big adult sizes and the kid sizes on the same sheet, which was super smart. We do a lot of that when we order our stuff. In fact, an example, if you want to see what we do when we order like our corporate stuff, I should have that folder around here. So we do lots and lots of gang sheets. That's a really common thing that we do. And gang sheet, why don't you explain a gang sheet and why it's such a cool idea?
So a gang sheet is basically you've got the real estate of a we call it an A3 size. I think it's about, is it 16 by 11?
Yeah, I think that's about right.
And you can put as many logos and as many different logos and different sizes on that sheet as you want. Previously, Supacolor, we're just stuck to single images, and that was our thing. We enjoyed just doing it like that because we thought we could provide you something that's ready to go and ready to press, and that was the exciting thing about it. But we got on board with gang sheets too, and it means you can put as many logos on there as you want and save money and save yourself time. You've got to cut them out yourself, but that's okay.
Yeah, so this is the gang sheet we do for our corporate branding. So kind of how we do this is with our Inktavo design with our little avocado guy, squeegee guy. That'll typically go on the front or the back. And then we'll use just our regular corporate branding right here on the front, or we have this fun little patch design we do on the front. And then we also use this one for left chest. And then this whole section right in here, this is our full back design. And so we set these gang sheets up so we have just maximum flexibility. And I believe this is A3. So it's a pretty good size sheet. And how close to the edges can I go on these?
You can go right to the edges because we actually add a little bit of space. Press.
So if I wanted to be really frugal, I could have just buried some more logos in here, and this is a little bit of extra scissors time on that. But
yeah,
this is
go nuts on it. We get some gang sheets and they might have 40 or 50 logos on there, just small ones.
Yeah, I had a good tip from a client. What he does with gang sheets, he orders a gang sheet and he puts left chest logos of all of his local high schools. He used to do it with plastisol transfer, so he had to really think it out. And he said, okay, well, I know gold is going to be in every logo, and I'm going to do navy and red and purple, and I'll be able to hit 4 or 5 schools that way. But now what he does is he just uses the Supacolor transfer because he doesn't have to worry about colors. And he does all 20 schools in his area, and then he runs a Facebook promo, and he says, hey, we're doing $10 pocket tees with your school logo, and he actually pays a little bit for a Facebook ad, and it $10 pocket tee with a 15-20% transfer because he's got 50 on a sheet or whatever. Probably not 50, but probably close to 18 to 20 probably. He's got a really inexpensive transfer, and if he doesn't sell them all, no big deal. Or he just can put them on put the excess transfers on the shelf and run the promotion in 2 months down the road, 6 months down the road, and he absolutely kills it doing that. It's just I should tell you guys because it's such a good idea, but but that's a great idea. That's a perfect use of a gang sheet right there. So last thing I want to chat about is one of the things that I'm super duper excited about is the fact that our customers that are, there's three companies in our kind of group under Inktavo. There are 3 brands, if you will. And so Printavo is shop management software. Inksoft is e-commerce software. And then we have GraphicsFlow, which is an online graphics management software where you basically in a nutshell, like your customers, you have what's called an art portal. And so you can send your customer to the art portal and they can pick out a graphic. And once I'll just go over here and we'll just type in family reunion. So family reunion. So they can pick out a graphic. And let's say they want to do this family reunion design. They go in here and they click on it and they put in their notes, change this to Sans 2023. And you'll do it it'd probably be 2024 because you probably do it in the summer of next year since you're in the middle of your New Zealand winter right now. And then they would submit this design. And then I would get a design request. Somebody's going to get a fake email here. And a goofy phone number. So they would submit this design request. And then what would happen, I'd get an email notification. The customer would get a notification. And then somebody on the other end would check they'd get what's called a design request. And so you get an email that links to the design request and you click on it and you're like, hey, what's going on here? Oh, okay, change this to Sans 2023. I just go in here and say customize. And we got to get you some really fun colors. And we could do the whole all blacks theme. That'd be pretty awesome. But with the gray thing going on there, you don't know if
your GraphicsFlow system. My kids have been using it and just to play around on and change designs and everything's so easy and straightforward.
And these are vector graphics right now. So, and these graphics are all in Pantone right now. So if I don't change the color, if I download this, Pantone colors, and Supacolor can just print those Pantone colors. But if I go in and change the color in the app, these are all going to be RGB colors. So there's a little bit of work on probably your end. You guys would probably just convert these over on your end. But we've got pretty mellow Pantone colors here that are RGB colors that actually convert really well to CMYK. So let's take this and make that black. And then we'll take this color and we'll make it kind of a dark gray going on here. Actually, we should have done the opposite. And then actually, if you don't like it, you reset it. So let's reset it real quick. So 23. That's what's fun, is being able to kind of experiment with color a little bit.
Yeah.
And so what I would probably actually do is I'd take this green and make it more of a teal. Right there, we get that into a teal green. I actually kind of like the blue, but teal and navy look really good together. So I'm going to go with kind of a navy, more of a true navy blue. And then, I don't know, that light blue color. Let's see, we could drop a gray in there. We could do a lighter version of the teal, or actually, tell you the truth, the gray is going to look great in there. Yeah, it does look good. So from this point, all I'm going to do is just save the design, and then I'm going to save, and I come back and re-customize this. And then for Supacolor, what you're going to do is you're just going to save this PDF file. And so we'll go and save the PDF file, and I'll just drop that into my webinar folder. And we'll just call it Family Reunion. And then I just would upload this to Supacolor is what I would do. So I would go and actually process my order. I really don't have to do anything here. This is going to be it's just literally ready to go. So here's your production file right there. I'm just going to go to the order processor at Supacolor, and we're going to go in and process an order. And I'd log into my account first, and then I'd use the uploader to upload the file, put any details. And what's kind of fun, I want to get into like super metallics right now, but one of the neat things you can do is one of the colors in here, I would have probably done the green and maybe even the silver. We could have made those metallics, and we can use the super metallic inks. And we have a great video on the GraphicsFlow YouTube channel on how to set up the artwork for the metallic inks. Basically, we have a Supacolor super metallic ink color chart. We just need to color that part of the graphic with that color in Color Illustrator. And Supacolor will pick it up on the other side and make sure that gets printed in metallic. And in this design, the little blue areas there in the cell phone, that's a cell phone, are super metallic, super easy. So that's how we do it. So I think we covered most of the things that I wanted to talk about today. And I'm just here to tell you, this is me speaking as, this is me as a consumer, because I'm a consumer. I've just really enjoyed working with Supacolor on all my little personal projects and the fun things. I kind of became the de facto uniform guy in our company for trade shows, because I have the good heat press, and I've been ordering all the transfers. So I have to actually do 33 transfers for front and back. So that's 66 presses for the Fort Worth show. But we're going to do our little inked avocado guy with a lasso and a cowboy hat. And we're going to order those transfers from you guys. And then I guess I'll be doing all the pressing in my garage on a Saturday. So I've just really enjoyed being a consumer, and I'm just so impressed with the company, the people, the fact that you basically operate as my pre-press department and fix, some of the problems in our artwork. The transfers are just superior, and it's just been a joy. So again, thank you so much for coming out and hanging out with Brett and myself. So thank you again.